Good morning and welcome, everyone. Today I'm reading from Rays of the One Light. These are commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriyananda and based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The law of karma. Bondage or soul release. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The epistle of St. Paul to the Galatians contains this oft-quoted statement. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramhansa tells a story from the life of the Benares saint, Trilunga Swami. A skeptic once determined to expose Trilunga as a charlatan. A large bucket of calcium lime mixture used in whitewashing walls was placed before the Swami. Master, the materialist said in mock reverence, I have brought you some clabbered milk. Please drink it. Trilunga unhesitatingly drained to the last drop the container full of burning lime. In a few minutes, the evildoer fell to the ground in agony. Help, Swami, help, he cried. I am on fire. Forgive my wicked test. The great yogi broke his habitual silence. Scoffer, he said, you did not realize when you offered me poison that my life is one with your own. Except for my knowledge that God is present in my stomach as in every atom of creation, the lime would have killed me. Now that you know the divine meaning of boomerang, never again play tricks on anyone. The well-purged sinner, healed by Trilunga's words, shrunk feebly away. Yogananda goes on to say, the reversal of pain was not due to any volition of the master, but came about through unerring application of the law of justice, which upholds creation's farthest swinging orb. Men of God realization like Trilunga allow the divine law to operate instantaneously. They have banished forever all thwarting cross-currents of ego. Not by reason alone, but by self-realization, are the ins and outs of destiny fully understood. Their web, though tied forever to the post of ego motivation, is too intricate to be perceived as a single thread. Only great masters can see it with clarity. Is visible to them in all its workings, not from within the tangle, but from above in superconsciousness. As Krishna said in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he who beholds inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. He is one with the Spirit. He has attained the true goal of action, perfect freedom. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. I'm going to step back here. I've tested negative for COVID for 2 weeks, so it's just a residual little throat that I have. Please forgive me. So, karma. I guess this is karma too. everything is karma. And when we are above in God consciousness and not tangled in this world, then we can see those threads, those cross currents of thwarting ego. We can see above and see how it all fits together. Like Trilunga could. So I'll just tell you a little story that also illustrates, is a favorite story of mine, that illustrates how these things work. So this happened, it's a true story. It happened about a century and a half ago. And there was a young painter, Pierre was his name, and he lived in Paris. And he was a struggling artist. And he loved to paint, not the city. It was so noisy and dirty. So whenever he could, he made the 2-day walk out to a beautiful forest where many of the artists hung out because it was so inspiring. It's said that you could even pet the deer. The deer were so tame. It was all lots of birds, just beautiful. So one time Pierre did this. He made the 2-day walk out to this forest, and he found a secluded place, and he set up his easel. But he noticed that the forest was a lot more quiet than usual. Something was different. And the birds weren't singing. Everything was sort of on edge. And he then noticed a rustling in the high grass, and a man emerged, all disheveled, mud splattered. And when he saw Pierre, he said, help me, please. I'm starving. And he came and practically collapsed at Pierre's feet. And Pierre gave him water, gave him food, and little by little this man told Pierre his story. His name was Raoul, and he was a journalist from Paris. And he had very openly and in print fiercely criticized the imperial government. And the guards came for him, surprised him at his home. And Raoul was barely able to escape. He jumped through a window, went onto an adjacent balcony, ran down the stairs, out into the street, caught a departing train just as it was leaving the station. And he got off in the forest, and he'd been wandering in the forest, no food or water for days. And he said to Pierre, I'm so exhausted. I guess I'll just give myself up. And Pierre said, no, don't do that. They'll kill you. Wait here. I'll go into the village. It's very nearby. I'll get you an artist's smock and some paints, and you'll just fit right in with all the other artists here in the forest. And so that's what they did. And they stayed together for several weeks until Raoul's friends in the city could arrange for him to be smuggled out of France. And so, as they were taking leave of each other, they had become good friends. And Raoul clasped Pierre's hand and choked with emotion. He said, I don't know what I would have done without your help. They were very close by that time. So then Raoul disappeared. He got out of France safely. He was safe. And then many years went by, and the imperial government was toppled, and another government came in. And meanwhile, Pierre was still in Paris, and he was about 30 years old at this time. And he went out with his easel to paint just there in the city. He was painting the River Seine. And he was just happily painting away when some soldiers came up behind him and were watching him paint. And this happened all the time with people coming to watch him at his art. His brush was like a ballet, they said. And suddenly one of these soldiers seized the canvas, took it off the easel, and started shouting at Pierre, "What are you doing?" Pierre was just a little struggling artist trying to make ends meet. He said, "I'm just painting a picture." And the soldier showed the canvas to his fellow soldiers and said, "What do you see?" And they said, "Oh my God, he's painting all the vulnerabilities where the other enemy could attack the city." And Pierre said, "That's ridiculous. I'm just painting the river." But they grabbed him, and then there was a mob starting to gather around him and yelling, "Spy, drown him in the river." And they marched him off with his hands tied behind his back to the headquarters, where they kept a firing squad on permanent duty just to take care of things like this. And they took him to have a trial and conviction, which was basically just the soldier's superior giving them the nod, "Okay, just take him to the firing squad." So there's poor Pierre being marched down to the square to be killed. And he closed his eyes for a moment, and he just thought how beautiful that forest and how peaceful it was there with the deer and the birds. And he thought, I hope the next world is more like that instead of like this. And when he opened his eyes, there were the firing squad getting ready to aim at him when he saw some high official making his way through the crowd, just magnificently dressed with a group of soldiers equally magnificent around him, pushing their way through the crowd, and this man was saying, "Hold your fire." And this official, high-ranking person came right up to Pierre. He put his hands on his shoulders and he said, "Do you remember me?" It was Raoul. And as he embraced Pierre, the crowd, instead of calling for blood, broke into jubilation that this man was a friend of Raoul. And he was pardoned and given papers saying that he could paint anywhere he wanted at any time. And Pierre thought about this ancient Greek story of Androcles, who was a slave. And one day when he was working, he came across a lion in agony. The lion had a big thorn in its paw and it couldn't walk. So Androcles took the risk and he knelt down in front of this agonizing lion and he pulled out the thorn. And then the lion shook himself off and went on his way. And then time went on and Androcles was sentenced to be killed in the arena he was thrown into the arena with the lion, but it was the same lion that he had helped. And even though that lion was very hungry, he refused to kill Androcles. And the people were so amazed at this that they let Androcles go free. So we see in these stories that what we put out is that boomerang effect that Trilunga was talking about. What we put out is what comes back to us. So karma is not the horrific thing that we think that it is. Karma is the loving hand of God showing us the right thing to do, the right way to go. And what is that way? It's the way of compassion, like Pierre, of giving help, of caring, of taking time, of giving whatever you can, helping in whatever way you can. You can think of it as in your own highest interest to give help, to give love, to give care, and to give thanks. That's the way to live in this world, to give thanks for everything. There was a story that Swami used to tell that has always been very meaningful to me. There was a young girl in India many years ago who was very saintly, very reserved, but had a beautiful vision of God. And she, at a young age, asked her family to just wall up her room and have a little opening for some food occasionally, and she just wanted to stay in meditation and prayer. And she did this for many years, and people got to know about this saint, and they would come to her for healing, and she would heal many, many, many people just from her little room, and she had a little place where she could greet people and help them. And her mother begged her, "Why don't you heal your father? He's so ill. You heal all these other people. Why won't you help your father?" And the woman refused. She said, "No, it's not right. He has to go through this." And more time went on, and the mother kept after her. "You've got to heal your father. He's in so much pain." And the girl again refused, and her mother kept pressing her until finally she said, "All right, but you will see what will happen." So the girl prayed and blessed her father, and he did recover. He got his full strength back. And what did he do? He took up carousing and drinking and all these bad habits, gambling and all these things, and he dissipated his life. The illness had kept him on track. The illness had kept him going in the right way. Again, remember that web of thwarting cross currents of karma that we don't see. It's only when we're in God realization that we can look down on it and see, oh, he was ill to keep him going in the right direction. There are no accidents. Everything in this world is for a purpose, a divine purpose. And so the father then died in this negative way of life. If the mother had listened to her daughter, this great saint, he would have died going in the right direction. We all have to leave this world, but let us go giving love, giving compassion, giving understanding, giving whatever we can to help other people. And in that way, we will have lived a worthy life, and things will be better in our next life. St. John of the Cross had a wonderful saying, and I'll just close with this, which I've always loved. He said, live in this world as though there is only your soul and God in the world. And then you can't become attached to anything. You can't get enamored of anything because it's all God. So let's try to live in that way and give what we can to help.
Have you ever noticed, I'm going to go out on a limb here and speculate that you have never noticed, a billboard or a TV advertisement or something that says, go home, don't spend any money, have peace, find joy inside. Swamiji's beautiful logo of Ananda, the mountain peak with the bird circling back within the sphere that its flight has circumscribed. Joy is within you. He made that sort of the motto of Ananda, and we look for it everywhere else. We look for it all over, and don't necessarily realize that it does live inside of us. This week, having just celebrated Thanksgiving, we were reminded as different people from around the world, including a number of you here, responded to the little card that Nirmala sent out. And the sweetness of just the remembrance of all these different people that we've encountered through the years, it sort of makes me think of the story Nirmala was telling of the painter and his friend who later on became a high position. It felt like that story multiplied times about 1,000, because it's not that we necessarily gave anything outwardly spectacular, but just the sweetness of friendship and watching people grow across the decades was just so moving. It brought tears. Nirmala showed me some of the emails. I don't get them automatically. They come to her when people respond. But it just was very, very touching. And I'll just reiterate what she was saying. It's so important to live in this world with gratitude. And I don't say that that's automatically easy. We go through things that can be very difficult, very challenging. How grateful are we for those things? I mean, that is a choice. That's not an automatic by any means. And we have to sort of grow into that in our own way, at our own pace. But to live in gratitude for our own potential to grow and to be helpful to others. Swamiji, many years ago, wrote a book called Money Magnetism. It was sort of his response to how to spiritualize prosperity. And a friend was suggesting that we address this topic more specifically because it's something that we don't talk about very much. Swamiji himself, once he wrote that book, it's kind of like psychically he just said, it's in there, go read it, it's good stuff, but I'm not going to spend my time up here talking about it. Because for 30 years that I can remember, more than 30 years, I don't think he ever at a Sunday service addressed the topic, not even one time. But later on, when we lived in India with him, he felt the need to write a course on material success. And he titled it initially Material Success Through Yoga Principles. And later on it became titled something different, like Success and Happiness Through Yoga Principles. One of the interesting parts of this is that it took him 1.5 years to write that course. 1.5 years of hard labor. I mean, compared to some of the other books that he could write in a few weeks, I mean, this was a slog for him. And he had to sort of put his mind in that consciousness of how do you work with your energy. What you give out, what you send out comes back to you. It doesn't just come back to you a little bit, it comes back to you a whole lot. Which means, guess what? I'm reminded of this adorable video. This little kid in India, it must have gone viral because it was everywhere for a while. He said, "What do you practice? What do you," with a lovely accent, "what do you practice? Because you will become very good at it." And meaning, whatever it is that you habitually, your attitude, your approach to life, your generosity, etc., it will return to you. You will get very good at it. If you practice being upset or angry or whatever, those things will come back to you too. And you'll find all the incredible reasons why you should be angry and why you should be upset, why you should be this, that, or the other thing. And it's so much nicer to live in this flow of grace. And the flow of abundance, I'm reminded of this, I'm just going to quote it rather than paraphrase it. This one line from the affirmation reading today is so helpful. Oops, I already jumped to next week. By giving nothing in return, he breaks the cycle of creativity without which prosperity's flow both materially and spiritually is blocked. And to spin that around in the other direction, when we give generously, when we share generously, just as the story Nirmala told with this painter, he didn't have much to share, but whatever he did have, he did share. He was willing, he tried to help. When we do that, especially when we do it creatively and lovingly and with enthusiasm, it finds its way back in the most amazing ways. It's like we're here we sort of have this mission, in a sense, in life, to do something, to play some particular role or other. And the divine is saying, how are you going to do it? You're going to do it kicking and screaming, or are you going to do it with joy, with enthusiasm? And of course, when we do it with joy and enthusiasm, then those things find their way back to us. I remember I went through a period of time as a teenager where what did I practice? I practiced grumpiness. And I don't know, it was a little bit of an experiment, you know? It was like, I remember, different situations come up, you're growing, your body's changing, you're learning to navigate more as an adult, but you're not quite rid of being a child just yet at that point. And I remember at one point, just kind of semi-consciously deciding that whenever a challenge came up, I was just going to get irate about it. And I would just go postal. I just went ballistic, just because I could, It was like, and I remember my mom sort of pulling me aside at one point and saying, apart from the fact that it's unpleasant to be around this, Do you really want to live that way? And it was like, as you may have gathered, I never forgot that particular piece of advice, that we live in the consciousness that we build. And that building of consciousness happens one little interaction at a time. You could almost say it happens one purchase at a time, because it's like we pay something out to life and we say, well, I'm buying this kind of experience. Do I do it willingly? Do I do it unwillingly? It all accrues. It all creates that web that Nirmala was talking about and that Swamiji talks about in the reading. And for most people, it's kind of a thwarting cross current of different, all sorts of different things. It's only when we get really focused and we get enough perspective on it from above that we can actually see it. Life itself is just saying, are you going to grow? Because when you stop, you've got one foot in a casket. So how are you going to grow? What are you going to do that's creative, that's new, that's loving, that's self-offering? Because then you're growing, and that's the child inside that is trying to find its way in life. And we would all do well to be that child. And so I'm just going to finish my thought about prosperity by way of explaining a little bit about the sale that is outside. I have the bully pulpit. I'm going to use it. Once every 8 or 10 years, I'm allowed to. It's a pre-sale for Christmas, and we're supporting the church. Yes, it's a fundraiser, but it's also, as Nirmala very cogently pointed out, a fundraiser, because there was a lot of joy that went into making these things. I was personally witness to quite a bit of it, because Santa's little workshop was not just happening upstairs, it was also happening in our house, all over our house, and at all hours of the day and night, I might add. But there is this natural creativity, and what is it that when we support this church, what are we supporting? We're supporting that imaginary billboard that you have never seen, that I alluded to earlier, that says, go home, find joy, have peace, and spread it like wildfire, or like wildflowers, whichever, your choice, but spread it to other people, because it will find its way back to you. We change the world by changing ourselves, not by shouting and screaming and getting all upset. And yes, there could be lots of things that we could get upset about. I remember turning off the tap as a teenager on the going postal method, which I also decided was not a really uplifted way to live, and just didn't want to go that way. We find that choice blesses other people and keeps on. It's like it accrues momentum. It acquires a certain momentum. So if you take something home with you today, know that you're taking home a little bit of joy from here, and it's a seed to be planted in the garden of your heart and to let it grow. You see the lights, you see the beautiful tree, the decorations, which are only really just begun. They've taken a number of notable steps forward in the last week, but what we're really decorating, just like the chant that we sang earlier, who is in my temple? It's not asking who's here. We're not taking a roll call of who's here today. It's who is in this temple. And it's divine. There is a divine inside, and it's waiting. And we're decorating that temple. So yes, those out in the foyer, those are symbols of that decoration, but it's the Advent season is coming now. What are we decorating? We're decorating our consciousness. We're decorating our consciousness with love, compassion, and divine light and joy. Let's share those with all the world.
And before we take the offering, I just wanted to say the punchline of my story, which I forgot to say. Pierre and Raoul, that story. Pierre was Renoir, the great painter. So aren't we grateful? Humankind is very grateful that he was saved by his friend, and we have that great legacy of all the beautiful artwork that Renoir painted.
Beautiful.